So today we're going to discuss first 1897, the Constitution of Biak-na-bato. The Constitution of Biak-na-bato was the provisionary constitution of the Philippine Republic during the Philippine Revolution. It was promulgated by the Philippine Revolutionary Government on November 1, 1897. The Constitution was borrowed from Cuba and it was written by Isabelo Artacho and Felix Ferrer in Spanish and later on translated into Tagalog. The organs of the government under the Constitution were the Supreme Council, which was vested with the power of the Republic, headed by the President and 4 department secretaries, the Interior, Foreign Affairs, Treasury, and War. Second, the Consejo Supremo de Gracia y Justicia or Supreme Council of Grace and Justice, which was given the authority to make decisions and affirm or disprove the sentences rendered by other courts and to dictate rules for the administration of justice. The third one, the Asamblea de Representantes or the Assembly of Representatives, which was to be convened after the revolution to create a new constitution and to elect a new council of government and representatives of the people. The Constitution of Biak-na-bato was never fully implemented since a truce, the Pact of Biak-na-bato, was signed between the Spanish and the Philippine Revolutionary Army. 1899, Malolos Constitution. After the signing of the truce, the Filipino revolutionary leaders accepted a payment from Spain and went to exile in Hong Kong. Upon the defeat of the Spanish to the Americans in the Battle of Manila Bay on May 1, 1898, the United States Navy transported Aguinaldo back to the Philippines. The newly reformed Philippine Revolutionary Forces reverted to the control of Aguinaldo, and the Philippine Declaration of Independence was issued on June 12, 1898, together with several decrees that formed the First Philippine Republic. The Malolos Congress was elected, which selected a commission to draw a draft constitution on September 17, 1898, which was composed of wealthy and educated men. The document they came up with, approved by the Congress on November 29, 1898. It was titled the Political Constitution of 1899. The document was patterned after the Spanish Constitution of 1812 with influences from charters of Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Guatemala, and the French Constitution of 1793. According to Philippe Calderon, the main author of the Constitution, these countries were studied because they shared similar social, political, ethnological, and governance conditions with the Philippines. As a direct challenge to colonial authorities of the Spanish Empire, the sovereignty was reverted to the people, a legal principle underlying the Philippine Revolution. The people delegated governmental functions to civil servants while they retained actual sovereignty. The 27 articles of Title IV detail the natural rights and popular sovereignty of Filipinos, the enumeration of which does not imply the prohibition of any other rights not expressly stated. Title III, Article 5 also declares that the state recognizes the freedom and equality of all beliefs, as well as the separation of church and state. These are direct reactions to features of the Spanish government in the Philippines, where the friars were dominant agents of the state. The form of government, according to Title II, Article 4, is to be popular, representative, alternative, and responsible, and shall exercise 3 distinct powers: legislative, executive, and judicial. Executive power was vested in the President and elected by a constituent assembly of the Assembly of Representatives and Special Representatives. The President will serve a term of 4 years without re-election. There was no Vice President, and in case of a vacancy, a President was to be selected by the Constituent Assembly. The legislative power was vested in a unicameral body called the Assembly of Representatives, members of which are elected for terms of 4 years. Secretaries of the government were given seats in the Assembly, which meet annually for a period of at least 3 months. Bills could be introduced either by the President or by a member of the Assembly. Some powers not legislative in nature were also given to the body, such as the right to select its own officers, right of censure and interpellation, and the right of impeaching the President, cabinet members, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and the Solicitor General. A permanent commission of 7, elected by the Assembly and granted specific powers by the Constitution, was to sit during the intervals between sessions of the Assembly. The 1899 Malolos Constitution was never enforced due to the ongoing war. The Philippines was effectively a territory of the United States upon the signing of the Treaty of Paris between Spain and the United States, transferring sovereignty of the Philippines on December 10, 1898. So now we're going to proceed. 1935, the Commonwealth Constitution. It is worth mentioning that after the Treaty of Paris, the Philippines was subject to the power of the United States of America, effectively the new colonizers of the country. From 1898 to 1901, the Philippines would be placed under a military government until a civil government would be put into place. Two acts of the United States Congress were passed that may be considered to have qualities of constitutionality. First was the Philippine Organic Act of 1902. It was the first organic law for the Philippine Islands that provided for the creation of a popular elected Philippine Assembly. The act specified that legislative power would be vested in a bicameral legislature composed of the Philippine Commission as the upper house and the Philippine Assembly as lower house. Key provisions of the act included a Bill of Rights for Filipinos and the appointment of 2 non-voting Filipino resident commissioners of the Philippines as representative to the United States House of Representatives. The second act that functioned as a constitution was the Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916, commonly referred to as Jones Law, which modified the structure of the Philippine government through the removal of the Philippine Commission, replacing it with a Senate that served as the upper house and its members elected by the Filipino voters, the first truly elected national legislature. It was also this act that explicitly declared the purpose of the United States to end their sovereignty over the Philippines and recognize Philippine independence as soon as a stable government can be established. By 1934, another law, the Taddings-McDuffie Act, also known as Philippine Independence Act, was passed by the United States Congress that provided authority and defined mechanisms for the establishment of a formal constitution by a constitutional convention. Claro M. Recto unanimously elected as Constitutional Convention President. The Constitution created the Commonwealth of the Philippines, an administrative body that governed the Philippines from 1935 to 1946. It is a transitional administration to prepare the country toward its full achievement of independence. It originally provided for a unicameral National Assembly with a president and vice president elected to a 6-year term without re-election. It was amended in 1940 to have a bicameral Congress composed of a Senate and House of Representatives, as well as the creation of an independent electoral commission and limited the term of the office of the president and vice president to 4 years, with 1 re-election. While the dominant influence in the Constitution was American, it also bears traces of the Malolos Constitution, the German, the Spanish, and Mexican constitutions, constitutions of several South American countries, and the unwritten English Constitution. The draft of the Constitution was approved by the Constitutional Convention on February 8, 1935 and ratified by then U.S. President Franklin B. Roosevelt on March 25, 1935. Elections were held in September 1935 and Manuel L. Quezon was elected President of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth was briefly interrupted by the events of the World War II, with the Japanese occupying the Philippines. Afterward, upon liberation, the Philippines was declared an independent republic on July 4, 1946. 1973. Constitutional authoritarianism. In 1965, Ferdinand E. Marcos was elected president. In 1967, Philippine Congress passed a resolution calling for a constitutional convention to change the 1935 Constitution. Elections of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention were held on November 20, 1970, and the convention began formally on June 1, 1971, with former President Carlos P. Garcia being elected as convention president. Unfortunately, he died and was succeeded by another former president, Diosdado Macapagal. Before the convention finished its work, martial law was declared. Marcos cited a growing communist insurgency as reason for the martial law, which was provided in the 1935 Constitution. With Marcos as dictator, the direction of the convention turned with accounts that the president himself dictated some provisions of the Constitution, manipulating the document to be able to hold on to power for as long as he could. President Marcos issued Presidential Decree No. 73, setting the date of the plebiscite to ratify or reject the proposed constitution. This plebiscite was postponed later on since Marcos feared that the public might vote to reject the constitution. Instead of a plebiscite, citizen assemblies were held, where the citizens coming together and voting by hand. Later on January 17, 1973, the president issued a proclamation announcing that the proposed constitution had been ratified. The Constitution was amended several times. In 1976, citizen assemblies once again decided to allow the continuation of martial law, as well as approve the amendments. The Constitution was supposed to introduce a parliamentary-style government where legislative power was vested in a Cameral National Assembly. The president was to be elected as the symbolic and ceremonial head of state chosen from the members of the National Assembly. The president will serve a 6-year term and could be re-elected to an unlimited number of terms. Executive power was relegated to the Prime Minister, who was also the head of the government and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. 1987 Constitution after martial law. The President Corazon Aquino's government had 3 options regarding the Constitution: revert to the 1935 Constitution, retain the 1973 Constitution, or start anew. They decided to make a new constitution that, according to the President herself, should be truly reflective of the aspirations and ideals of the Filipino people. In March 1986, President Aquino proclaimed a transitional constitution to last for a year, while a constitutional commission drafted a permanent constitution. This transitional constitution called the Freedom Constitution. In 1986, a constitutional convention was created, composed of 48 members. The convention drew up a permanent constitution, largely restoring the setup abolished by Marcos in 1972. The new constitution was officially adopted on February 2, 1987. The executive branch is headed by the president and his cabinet, whom he appoints. The president is the head of the state and the chief executive, but his power is limited by significant checks from the 2 other co-equal branches of government, especially during emergency. This is put in place to safeguard the country from the experience of martial law despotism during the presidency of Marcos. In cases of national emergency, the president may still declare martial law, but no longer than a period of 60 days. Congress, through a majority vote, can revoke this decision or extend it for a period that they determine. The Supreme Court may also review the declaration of martial law and decide if there were sufficient justifying facts for the act. The president and the vice president are elected at large by direct vote, serving a single 6-year term. The legislative power resides in a Congress divided into 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The 24 senators are elected at large by popular vote and can serve no more than 2 consecutive 6-year terms. The House is composed of district representatives representing a particular geographic area and makes up around 80% of the total number of representatives. There are 234 legislative districts in the Philippines that elect the representatives to serve 3-year terms. The 1987 Constitution created a party list system to provide spaces for the participation of underrepresented community sectors or groups. Party list representatives may fill up not more than 20% of the seats in the House. Aside from the exclusive power of legislation, Congress may also declare war through a 2/3 vote in both upper and lower houses. The power of legislation, however, is also subject to an executive check, as the president retains the power to veto or stop a bill from becoming a law. Congress may only override this power with a 2/3 vote in both houses. The Philippine court system is vested with the power of the judiciary and is composed of a Supreme Court and lower courts as created by law. The Supreme Court is a 15-member court appointed by the President without the need to be confirmed by Congress. The appointment the President makes, however, is limited to a list of nominees provided by a constitutionally specified judicial and bar council. The Supreme Court justices may hear on appeal any cases dealing with the constitutionality of any law, treaty, or decree of the government, cases where questions of jurisdiction or judicial error are concerned, or cases where the penalty is sufficiently grave. It may also exercise original jurisdiction over cases involving government or international officials. The Supreme Court is also in charge of overseeing the functioning and administration of the lower courts and their personnel. The Constitution also established three independent constitutional commissions, namely the Civil Service Commission, a central agency in charge of government personnel. The second, the Commission on Elections, mandated to enforce and administer all election laws and regulations. And the third one, the Commission on Audit, which examines all funds, transactions, and property accounts of the government and its agencies. To further promote the ethical and lawful conduct of the government, the Office of the Ombudsman was created to investigate complaints that pertain to public corruption, unlawful behavior of the public officials, and other public misconduct. The Ombudsman can charge public officials before the Sandigan Bayan, a special court created for this purpose. Only the House of Representatives can initiate the impeachment of the President, members of the Supreme Court, and other constitutionally protected public officials such as the Ombudsman. The Senate will then try the impeachment case. This is another safeguard to promote moral and ethical conduct in the government.
And don't forget to click the bell button!